What is going on, everybody? My name is Austin. Today, let's talk about the brand new Batman relaunch by Matt Fraction and Jorge Jiménez. After an almost 10-year-long run, DC has decided to relaunch the Batman title with Matt Fraction starting as the writer for this run. And honestly, I think this was a great decision because the 2016 until now runs have not been super good. Among the writers on this book, we have Tom King, James Tynion, Joshua Williamson, Chip Zdarsky, and Jeff Loeb. Now, out of all those authors I just mentioned, Tom King had the longest run on Batman with 85 issues, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't know who at DC allowed Tom King to write that many issues of Batman. His run was awful. Tom King certainly made some creative decisions during his time as the Batman writer. Some things in particular that I did not like about his run. The absolute mess that was Batman and Catwoman's wedding. I understand that wasn't entirely his fault. Editorial did have a say in that, but it was still an absolute mess. He absolutely butchered Thomas Wayne Flashpoint Batman storyline. It should have ended with Bruce getting that note from his father. There was no need to continue his story after that. His decision to kill Nightwing, yes, can be viewed as good, but what followed after that is a consequence of Tom King's writing, which is the Rick Grayson arc. I don't care if he didn't write it, that is indirectly his fault. He also wrote this really weird story in his Batman run where Booster Gold wanted to get Batman a wedding gift. Don't even get me started on what he did to Booster's character. He butchered it. One of the worst mischaracterizations that I've seen in a long time. He just depicts Booster Gold as a bumbling moron who has no idea what he's doing. At this point in comics, Booster Gold knows damn well, if he wants to change the timeline, it will have consequences. And what does he do? He tries to stop Bruce Wayne's parents from getting killed as a wedding gift. What the hell? And obviously, the biggest decision that he made in his entire run was the decision to kill Alfred Pennyworth. By far the best part of King's Batman run is probably Cold Days, but unfortunately, that is not good enough to outweigh all of the bad things that he did, in my opinion. Moving on to James Tynion, I really wish that he had a longer stint on the Batman book because that's the last time I really think it was actually really good. His Joker War and Fear State storylines were really good in my opinion. They tackled a lot of stuff. Now, unfortunately, James Tynion's run on Batman was that short because he stepped away to focus on personal projects. And don't get me wrong, I admire that. I like James Tynion as a writer. I'm really enjoying his current Exquisite Corpses run that he's doing right now. And I read the first issue of Invisible Man, which was pretty good. You should check that out. Joshua Williamson's run on Batman was also very brief, and it wasn't really like a storyline. It was more of like a bridging point to connect James Tynion's Batman with Chip Zdarsky's Batman. And then we move on to Chip Zdarsky's Batman, and I'm not gonna lie, as someone who absolutely loved his Daredevil stuff, I was pretty disappointed by this series. Failsafe originally opened as a really cool villain. It was very intriguing, but I did not like what he did with Tim Drake. I did not like Gotham War, and to be honest, his take on the character was just a pretty big letdown in general. And last and definitely least, we have Jeff Loeb's run on this Batman, and please, just retire, Jeff. I'm sorry, man. Hush 2 was so unbelievably bad as an event that it just makes me think DC should retire the Red Hood character because they have no idea what direction they want to take this character in. They have no idea what to do with Jason Todd in general. And to be honest, Jeff Loeb being on this book to begin with just seems like DC trying to put someone notable on the book to get people interested in it, and it totally backfired. By far the most important thing that you need to know going into this new Batman relaunch from this run is that Alfred Pennyworth is dead, and he is still dead. Although I don't really agree with the death of the character, I do think that at least keeping him dead has some value to the story. At least from my point of view, it has been a very pivotal writing moment for Nightwing and for Damian Wayne. Now, with all that being said, let's get into this first issue of Batman #1. So the issue begins with Jim Gordon talking with his other officer, Officer Espinoza, and this moment is a small reminder that Jim Gordon is no longer the commissioner of the GCPD. And they're just having a casual conversation about the weather, when all of a sudden, Killer Croc comes out of nowhere and barrels into a truck of fresh steak, devouring all of it, and then bails. Now, Jim tells Officer Espinoza, we're gonna call this one in, and she's like, call this one in. He's like, that's right. Work as a cop in this town long enough and you'll learn. Always call for backup. And we get this epic shot of Batman standing in the hole that Killer Croc just burst out of. Jorge Jiménez is really such a phenomenal artist. I'm so glad that he is on this book with Matt Fraction. Now, Killer Croc's doctor, Anna Zeller, notes, "We're as shocked as you are, Batman. Waylon Jones self-reported for treatment and could have left anytime he wished. This containment unit was built to withstand a bomb blast." But Batman says, "You're new here, Doctor. Killer Croc hasn't been Waylon Jones for a long time. I try to keep them separate in my mind. It's easier that way when they inevitably disappoint you." And she replies by saying, "Waylon may be a supervillain to you, but he's a patient to me. Waylon Jones is changing, Batman. He began ectasis, shedding his skin, but it continued deeper, as though he were shedding everything inside and out." And Batman says, "People never change, not really." And to be honest, that's a pretty unusual thing for Batman to say, considering his entire philosophy is trying to rehabilitate his rogues gallery. But given everything he's been through over the last couple years, I can't say that I'm shocked to hear him say this. Dr. Zeller continues by saying, "Tell that to Waylon. He's been exposed to unknown morphotoxins with unpredictable results. He's regressing, gentle, almost childlike, but then," and Batman interrupts and says, "But then your mutating, man-killing monster baby wanted to go out and play." But Dr. Zeller says he may be capable of great violence, but he's capable of great tenderness too, curiosity even, wonder, but right now he's afraid. And fear prevents us from having a say in how our minds respond to the chaos of trauma, but it requires trust, care, and time. Batman says, "The one thing we're out of is time, Dr. Zeller. Have you already called the police?" And she says, "I may be new, Batman, but I'm not stupid. I called you first." And he says, "When the police do come, stall. If they find Croc before I do, they'll shoot to kill. In the meantime, I'll do my best to find your patient." Now, one of the things that Matt Fraction is keeping in this run is that Vandal Savage is still the commissioner of Gotham City Police Department. Now, obviously, Vandal Savage is usually depicted as a Justice League villain, and Vandal Savage being the commissioner of Gotham City Police is pretty interesting to me because of his conflict with the Justice League. He has a little bit of animosity towards Batman. Now, he does not use the police force specifically to go after Batman, but he does not really allow Batman to get away with some of the stuff that he did when Jim Gordon was commissioner. He tries to keep Batman on a much shorter leash, and he definitely does not allow Batman to work with the Gotham police force as closely as he used to. What we're seeing here is Vandal Savage, who is introducing some tactical urban combat officers from private security. They execute high-intensity security operations like recapturing tonight's escapee, Waylon Jones. They are deputized and sanctioned to aid and abet you in bringing back law and order to our streets. Now, one of his officers says, "Commissioner Savage, what do we do if we see, him?" And Commissioner Savage says, "His time will come. The Batman can't outrun Gotham justice." Now, we cut back to Batman in the Batmobile, and we see a voice that says, "Rather moody and silent this evening, Master Bruce," and it's revealed that we are seeing a hallucination of Alfred Pennyworth. Now, I'm not gonna lie, initially I thought this was like an AI hologram of Alfred, but it was not. It was confirmed by Matt Fraction that this was a hallucination. And Alfred says, "Where are we going?" And Batman says he's playing a hunch. And Alfred says, "Literal as always, sir. Well done." And Batman says, "Either that doctor is right or I am. People can change or they can't." And Alfred responds and says, "And which do we find worse, sir?" However, this conversation is interrupted by a police scanner. And Alfred says, "To be continued." We cut over to Robinson Park when a group called the Creeps, yes, that is their name, the Creeps, are chasing after two women. And that is when Batman and Alfred show up in the Batmobile and runs these guys over. These guys are not exactly physical threats to Batman by any means. He makes light work of them, and he says the Creeps have decided that Robinson Park is their hunting ground. He says the police don't think it merits concern. I disagree. Sorry I couldn't get to you sooner. He says you both need trauma and medical care, and he says, "Hold on, ma'am. Hold still a moment." He reaches for the girl's ear and finds a butterfly and says, "Look, Morpho Menelaus," and she's a long way from home. He begins to walk away, and the girls are like, "Wait, you're just leaving us alone?" And Batman says, "No, EMT arrives in 3 minutes. Until then, car, protect them." He puts the Batmobile in autonomous operation and then leaves and tells them to stay together and stay in the light. Now, Batman heads over to the Gotham Natural History Museum, where it is pretty clear that Killer Croc has left a trail leading Batman directly to him. We go inside and there is a history museum security guard who has no idea how to handle this situation. He says, "I need backup, please. I have 2 civilians with me, and he's here. He's just sitting here, and I don't know what to do. Is there anyone there at all? Can anyone help me?" Now, Batman walks up and comforts this little girl, and then gets behind the security guard and says the gun is scaring the child and would only make Croc mad. He tells the security officer, "Now quickly, quietly get the civilians out of here, and contact Dr. Zeller at Arkham Towers. Do not call the police." And he's like, "Why? What are you gonna do?" And Batman turns on his bat gauntlets that are electrocharged and says, "Strike a little terror into his heart." Now, Batman walks up and confronts Waylon, and he says, "Come on, Croc, let's get this over with." And Croc doesn't really respond. He's just breathing heavily. And Waylon just says, "You bad, so go." Hallucination Alfred asked Master Bruce, "What if this Dr. Zeller is correct? Some creatures do in fact change. What if some eternal cycle has begun within him again? And even if for only this moment, he's become something like a child alone in a violent, terrible world he cannot understand, drowning in fear. If it's as you say and no one ever really changes, Master Bruce, then surely you know how that feels." With Alfred basically acting as Bruce's conscience, Bruce takes his mask off and begins to talk to Waylon. And he tells him, "You know, Waylon, I used to have one of these in my house." And he just says, "Big house." Waylon looks at him and says, "You head new now." And Bruce is like, "If you say so." Waylon says, "Me head new, but bad now, lost." And then he burps and says, "I ate the zoo." And Bruce says, "I know you did, buddy, I know." Waylon says, "Him head like me up there." And Bruce is like, "How so? You mean a king?" And Waylon says, "No, mean bad, scary, hungry. Can't think, head bad, maybe am bad." But that's when Waylon's doctor, Anna Zeller, shows up and says, "I came to help," and she's holding a miniature dinosaur toy. She says, "Do you want my help? Would you like to come home?" And Waylon says, "Head bad, made home bad, am bad." And she says, "You made a bad choice, Waylon. Now you can make a good choice. Come home, let me help you." And Waylon agrees. And he turns around and looks at Batman and says, "Home now, she help. Who help you?" And Bruce says, "My head is okay, Waylon. I don't need help." And Waylon says, "If you say so." And he gives that dinosaur toy to Batman. After this entire confrontation, Bruce heads home back to Pennyworth Manor, and he puts that dinosaur toy on his shelf. It looks like he's going to start the trophy collection again. But that's when Bruce hears a voice over his communications and says, "Hey there, boss, you got your ears on?" And Bruce says, "Always, Robin, it's the emergency frequency." And Tim says, "Is there anybody on the police force we're friendly with these days?" And we see Tim Drake standing over someone with his hands in the air, and 2 police officers are holding him at gunpoint. And that brings us to the conclusion of issue number 1 by Matt Fraction and Jorge Jiménez. Now, to me, what this issue did for Matt Fraction's Batman run is really set the tone for what kind of take he's going to have on the character, and it looks like it's going to be a more broken down Bruce. And that's not super original, right? We've definitely seen that before, but I think Fraction makes it clear that this take on Batman is a lot more about his apathy. It's about Bruce confronting his coping mechanisms. Now, I really like that Fraction addressed some of the stuff that was from the previous Batman run. He's carrying over some of the most notable and best parts of the previous Batman run and translating them into his. Specifically, Vandal Savage being the head of the GCPD, Jim Gordon being a beat cop, Arkham Towers being dead center in Gotham City, and obviously Batman not having his fortune anymore. He doesn't have Wayne Manor. He doesn't have an infinite amount of wealth. And it looks like Fraction is bringing back this advanced peacekeeping police force. And so I think it's a nice blend of some of the stuff that happened in the previous Batman run being brought into this series. And back to what I said about how Fraction is going to perceive Bruce. It's not the deconstruction of Bruce's psychology. We've seen that a lot. But what I think really Fraction is going for is, how is Bruce going to bring himself back better from some of the worst years of his life? Obviously, the previous Batman run, a lot of stuff happened to Bruce, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and I'm very interested to see what Matt Fraction does with things like that. All in all, this is a really good start to the new Batman series. Let me know what you guys think in the comments of what you thought about the first issue, and I will see you guys in the next video.